Welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast, where we talk about the struggles and celebrations that leaders and entrepreneurs experience on their journey to success. I'm your host, Kristina, and I'm passionate about helping you achieve massive amounts of success at work and at home. We'll talk about all things people and organizational wellness, share relatable stories, and feature insightful guests because quality people and processes are at the heart of every success story. Ready to learn, grow, and have fun? Let's dive in. Hello and welcome to the Business Building Blocks podcast. I'm your host, Kristina Schmitt. I hear from a lot of leaders that they want to get input, but they're very afraid of losing control. So they'll come to me and they'll say, okay, I've got this strategy. I've rolled it out to the team and they just don't seem to get it. They don't, seem to agree, or there's just no buy-in and they're not pushing for it as hard as I am. So I'll hear that. And then I'll hear, well, I rolled out, what I was going to do, and then I got their input and then came back and told them what we were doing. And there was a disconnect there. So what I want to talk about and clarify is what real input looks like and how to get input without losing control or without losing your idea and your leadership of it. It's fantastic when you're trying to change something. The very first thing you should do is get input from the key stakeholders. So the people that will be implementing it, the people that use it, so you can get some base information as to what works, what doesn't work, and maybe some great ideas for how to improve. Because I don't know about you, but when I start working on something day in and day out, the thing I'm always doing is saying, okay, well, how could I make that smoother? How could I, stop dropping the tool in this area? How could I make that work better? How can I make the flow work better? So when you're in it, you see the problems and you also see some great potential solutions. So absolutely, you need to get input. And I would say do it beforehand because that is how they can know they're heard. Now, what I also hear is that when people get this feedback or they get this input from people, they sometimes feel like, okay, well, I heard their input and now I have to go with what they said because they said this. But that kind of like, I want to do this, like this is the plan, but now they're saying, let's go, like, I want to go right, but they're saying, let's go left. And ultimately, what the reality is that if you're the leader, you do have the final say. Now, there's a way to do this that feels inclusive and that feels like you've heard the input. And there's a way to do this that's frankly going to get people a little angry and potentially, and hopefully not, but potentially work against you and not help and not contribute to the overall well-being of the company or the idea, the plan, whatever it is that you're rolling out. So let's get this clarified once and for all so that we can use it better. Okay, so a couple things I want you to remember. You do still have the last say. Whether you get input or not, you're the leader, you're the one in charge, you do have final say. Number two, when you're doing this, when you're gathering input, again, if it's a new system that you're rolling out, the reality is that you have decided we're doing this system and we're doing it. That's not on the table. So you need to be extremely clear of what is up for discussion versus what isn't up for discussion. So as the leader, you may say, okay, we need to change from Microsoft to Google. Okay, that is the decision. We've already contemplated the what, so we know the what. I need your help with the how. And that's where you get their input. So you're very clear that the what doesn't change and the how does. Now, you may have somebody coming in very, very excited saying, we cannot go to Google. So starting to challenge the what. What you need to do here is you do need to listen. However, listening does not mean that you're complying. It does not mean that you're going to change your tune, but you can listen. You can listen to the concerns, you can listen to the why, and you can still say, we're going to do the thing. I hear your concerns. They're valid. This is the data. This is the information that we've utilized and why we made this decision, and we're doing it. So I have taken and borrowed this statement from this amazing parenting book. I've brought it up several times. Dr. Becky Kennedy, can't think of the name of it off the top of my head, but she has a great philosophy. And I love to bring this into my leadership because sometimes we forget this, but two things can be true at the same time. They can be upset about the change that's being made. And we can still do it. We still need to do it. So it can be true. They can be upset and they still need to do the thing, right? Like, so we have to be able to see that there are two realities here. And there's probably, if you really reflect on your own decisions, there's probably a lot of things that you can say, yeah, I know I need to do this thing. I really don't want to. I feel like I'm being dragged kicking and screaming there. And I have a lot of emotions about it, but it's still happening. Like, I can't change it. Your kids are going to grow up. You can't change it, whether you want them to still be wee little babies. They still grow. They still change. Life still keeps moving. And the same thing is true when we look at changes that happen in the workplace, that they can change and they need to change. And we might have some emotions about that change. And the reality is we're still doing it. I just need your help in how to do it the best. Now, it is still very prudent and very good as a leader to, discuss some of these emotions, give them some time to vent, and still remind that, okay, well, this is still our direction and I need you to get on board. Okay. So you can be upset and be on board. You can. Let's deal with the upset. Let's figure out what's getting in the way, because there will, and you might find this, there will be times when some of the emotions caught into it are actually associated to something else entirely. Like, it's not my Microsoft versus Google. There's really no difference, right? But they've always used Microsoft. They like the way that the meeting thing looks. And, it feels weird, or this looks weird the way the files are laid out. So there's a pushback, not because of the system you've chosen, but because of the change. That they're changing from what they know. So they're taking this, if you go back to one of my delegation episodes, how to delegate, right? They're in this learning process. So they've gone from this unconsciously competent place, and now you've moved them into unconsciously incompetent. So they don't even know what they don't know. Or they know a little bit because they've seen it and worked with it a little bit. So they know, but they're consciously and still incompetent for doing it. So you've changed their neural pathways and you're asking them to learn something new, something that is normally just automatic and easy. And that's hard. But the beauty of this is that if there's one person in your planning team that has this struggle, you can guarantee there's going to be other people. So listening to this person and taking their input from that path, like, hey, we're doing the change and let's talk about the how. Let's talk about how do we train people? Okay, how do we deal with the emotion of the change? How do we need to listen to people. We need to listen to their emotions. We need to say, it's so easy. We don't need to say, oh, it's so easy. You should just be able to do it. We need to say, okay, oh, I hear that it's hard. Here's how you do it. Here's some step-by-step instructions. Here's some videos on how to do it with like an actual screenshot of how to do it with, where do I click on the screen or which button do I hit on my keyboard? Like some real detailed things, like maybe you need to go there and, have some extra support, some key resources for people as they do the changeover. So it's a great insight into how to get more people on board to listen and actively listen to them. So again, it's very important to clarify that what's on the table for discussion and where you're asking for input versus where you're not. Now, what if this person brings up something that you had never considered that is life-changing, earth-shattering, like, maybe you don't want to go to Google because they're outsourcing to, something that's totally against what you're doing. And you just, oh my gosh, I don't want to do it. Okay, that's probably not often going to happen. But if it does, it's okay at that point as well to be vulnerable enough to say, you know what, that does change things. Let's go back to the drawing board and rethink it and hash it out and see if this is something we can deal with or something we can't. But the likelihood of something like that really being the case, if you did, your what homework up front is, probably not huge and maybe the exception to the rule. Typically, if you've decided we're going to do this thing, I want to know the how. That's great. That's fantastic. Now let's talk about, you've got a management team and you're planning the strategy. Okay. So what should be on the table versus what is the owner's responsibility and owner's direction versus what do you need the team's input on? So that ultimately does come up to you and it's up for your determination. But I hear a lot of frustration sometimes that they're like, well, I've got my path and they don't seem to understand my path. So the best thing that is going to help with this is, again, clarifying the who does what, the why do we exist, what are these strategic anchors, like clarifying that with that team. Because again, the more clarity that we have around what we do and how we do it and who's doing it and how we behave while we're doing it, the more clarity that that top management team has around those things, the better off you're going to be. Because there's always a gap. There's always a gap in communication. You may have, partners that have worked together for a number of years, but when they start talking to each other, there's still a gap of communication because something happens in the space between, number one, in the space between your brain and your mouth when it comes out of your mouth. And then there's something that happens between your mouth and the other person's ears and their ears and their brain, and then potentially their mouth again, right? There's always, whenever there's a transition, there's always a gap. So getting more clarity around that helps to clarify the what and the why, so that when you're getting the input, maybe on the what, but especially on the how, that it's very clear and you're not getting pushed back on the what as much. So that's the first one, is that being very clear what you're asking for help on and what you're asking for input on. The second thing that I want you to actually remember is that just because you hear the feedback and just because you're empathetically listening to their feedback, it does not mean that you're going to go with their idea. I was working with a leader at one point, and he and I were discussing how to set up his key team. And he said, I had a couple people give me their input, and I didn't really understand why they wanted these people, but I went with it because they said it, because that's how I have to keep them included. If it was their idea, I have to go with it. And we don't have to do that. Okay. So we don't, just because we're asking for the input, it doesn't mean that we have to go with what they've said. But what we do need to do, and just because we've listened to their reasons behind it, doesn't mean we have to go with what they've said or we're agreeing with it or condoning it. But what we do need to do is communicate. So, okay, you can hear something that might be an idea, but it does not work with the plan to move forward, because as a leader, as an owner, you're going to have the bigger picture. And ultimately, especially the business owners, you have hopefully designed your business to support the lifestyle that you want to have, or you're moving in that direction. So you have the bigger picture, the bigger view of it. So when you're getting this input from other people and they think you want to go over this way, just because they've said that to you, if you take that input in and then do the opposite or don't do anything with it at all, you're going to have people that aren't happy. But if you do something with it and then take it away, rehash, rethink, and then decide to do something else, the best thing you need to do is give them the why and the what. So circle back. Okay. So when you're presenting the idea, you can say, hey, we had these great ideas. So if you have to do it in a big group, we had these great ideas come out and they loved them. But what we really ultimately wanted to do was this, and this fits with our strategy, our strategic anchors, our values, our big 20-year plan, that kind of thing, because of this, and this. Explain the what and the why, and make sure you've communicated back that, hey, I considered this, and we can't go this way because of this, or we've decided to go this direction because this more closely meets our overall plan. So how do you communicate this? So I kind of described how you would do it in maybe a big presentation. Like, let's say you just did this rampant, huge input from everybody sort of thing. You may have a hard time giving individual input to, all 300 people in the organization that you just gave, that just gave you input. You may have a hard time sitting one-on-one with all of them to give them the direct reason that their one idea out of the 1,000 ideas that you had come in, why it wasn't working. So if you're doing it in a large presentation sort of format, then you can, do as I described. A better way, and especially if you've had, let's say a management team meeting, come in and talk about the strategy, and everybody, each department gave, hey, we want to do this. We want to go this way. This is, exciting for us. We see this new technology. And then you decide you're not going to do their idea. Okay. Now this is better done on a one-on-one sort of area and say, okay, we listened to this. We looked at this. This is the overall picture. We've decided to go this way because of this, and this. How do you feel about it? So you're allowing them that moment to be upset, to maybe say, I really disagree, and or like have some feelings, right? Give them that time to have some feelings, because we all have feelings. When things don't go our way, when things change, we have emotions that go. And what that is that's our body protecting ourselves from this change, because change can be very scary. So it's a stress response, it's a protection, it's this emotion that comes tied to changes that we make. So allow them to have that time in private, one-on-one. And that's going to help you come up with the best overall solution. Now, let's say you're doing this whole brainstorming as a management team, which would be the way I would actually suggest to do it. So don't like get input from your big leadership team and then go away and then make a separate plan without them. Like, I would actually suggest bring the team in and figure out where you're going, because now you can, like, people can argue out their different ways and everybody can, talk about it. But you as the leader still ultimately have the final decision making. So let's say your whole team is saying, I just really don't think we should make this switch. I think that it's going to, we're going to struggle here. We're going to struggle here. We're going to struggle here. But ultimately, you know this is the switch you need to make. If there is if that's where you're going, you can still do that. You can say, I have heard you and I get where you're coming from. And this is the way we need to go. And I'm here to discuss the emotions. I'm here to discuss, troubles, but I need your full support. Can you offer me that? Because you do need their support, especially if they're leaders of other teams. You need those leaders' support to get things going, and you need them to commit to it. So again, let them have the emotions together, because if your team is really working well together, you can do that together. And you ultimately can say, this is still the direction. Typically, something like that might not happen on a Microsoft versus Google sort of thing, right? But there might be like a whole strategy. Like maybe you've read a book and this is how you want to lead the company. But people are like saying, oh, it's going to take too much time and I don't want to, do it that way. And, I don't think I can have these teams. They're pushing back because the change feels hard for them, right? You can listen to their pushback. You can be empathetic about that pushback, and you can still say, this is how I believe this is going to work the best for our company, and we're going to do it. Let's talk about your feelings around that. Let's talk about moving you into that I'm a helper, not a herder of this situation. So you can have those conversations as well. And ultimately, you do have that say. If you find you're doing that all the time, start to look at, okay, what am I forcing through versus what are they pushing back on? And start really looking at it. And this is one of those, like, is it me or is it you kind of thing, right? So it could be one of two things. Like maybe you have a lot of ideas and you get them decided in your head and you don't want any input. So there might be some openness to receiving some input, listening better to others, and using that collective to make a decision, versus there might be some disconnect between how your team is functioning and how you're functioning. So there's room for trying to understand better for how you're thinking and how they're thinking. So you can employ tools like a Working Genius team assessment or team workshop. So you can start talking about how people are thinking. Like maybe you love to change because you're an inventor, and maybe everybody else on your team is an ET and they just want to keep doing the same things over and over. That's going to feel really hard for them. And understanding that how you're operating is different from how they would like to operate is a good thing. So you can be more empathetic to their struggles and help move them along. And they can be more understanding as to why you're moving around a lot. So you can maybe say, maybe I'm moving around too much. And they can maybe say, okay, I have to be a little bit more open to change. Right? So there's bending in both, there's learning in both. But again, talking about it and getting it on the table and discussing how to move forward that way, that's what's going to help you work better as a team. That's what's going to that's what's going to give you better ideas and better solutions and overall better business. So if you enjoyed today's episode, please like it, share it with a friend, share it with another leader who is trying to get something across the table and not understanding how to get input and still have control of their business. And if you would like some more help with that, reach out, send me an email to say, hey, I'm struggling with this. What would we do? And we can hop on a call and talk it through, because sometimes you just need an ear. So reach out and let me know what is working, what isn't working for you, and what you'd like some help with. So please like the episode, share it with a friend, leave a comment on the YouTube, and leave a review on your favorite podcast application. And I will see you on the next episode of the Business Building Blocks podcast.
Thanks for tuning in to the Business Building Blocks podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss what's next. If you found value in our conversation, please leave a quick review, like, or share. It helps us reach more amazing listeners like you. For more resources and insights, visit KristinaSchmitt.ca, where you can find tools and support to empower your leadership journey. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you in the next episode.